Welcome, everybody. Can I just check that, Emma, you can hear us all right?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Kirsty, sorry, we've got a different name on different screens. Can you hear us, Kirsty?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Better, there we are. Right, I'll read out the fire procedure. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear a fire alarm, please treat it as real. Evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest safe escape route is the stairs as you leave the council chamber or the gallery on your left. Exit by the door to the back of the building. Walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts cannot be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not enter the building until you're advised it is safe to do so by a member who are guests in the public gallery. So, first thing on the agenda item is apologies and substitutions.
I've only received apologies from Councillor Lever. I've heard nothing further from the remaining councillors that aren't here today, or Steve Milford. Oh. We've got Steve Harrison.
Morning, Steve.
Morning, Steve.
We thought we might be lucky and you were a member at that point.
You got here.
Apologies.
But we've obviously got the quorum to,
Right, so
go ahead.
We'll confirm we are core with three. Many of the others either. I don't know if my colleagues have. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 3 then is public questions. And at this point, we'll turn to the gallery. There are no written public questions. If you could please press the button so that the red light comes on. That's right. If you could, if you press the button on the little device so that the red light comes on.
There should be there's two silver buttons. If you press the one on the right, that's now on. So when you speak,
When I speak, I can hear that. Oh, yes. Sorry. Morning.
Morning. And well, just if you could pause just for a second, we'll let Councillor Stevens join us.
Oh, yes.
He's just running in.
Good.
Right, thank you.
I'm not quite sure who to address this to, you or, I don't know, maybe Steve or something, but with increasing violence and theft of Palestinian land in Gaza, the occupied West Bank, East Jerusalem, Lebanon and Syria, and unilateral Israeli decisions and measures aimed at expanding Israel's unlawful presence in the West Bank, as condemned by 80+ members of the United Nations yesterday, is the Isle of Wight Council as administering authority and delegating implementation of their investment strategy currently to the Isle of Wight Pension Fund Committee, and from April to the Central Pool, making adequate provision for legal costs associated with litigation stemming from breaches of the Genocide Convention that may follow the anticipated ruling of the ICJ in circa 2027, or any other litigation stemming from investment practices that could be deemed to support breaches of international law, and subject to the target of such litigation, the Council, Central Pool, Central Government, or any individual councillors, council officers named in the litigation bearing the legal costs.
Thank you for your question. Quite a few components to that. I'll turn to Steve to see if you want to answer that today or given that that was quite a long list of things, whether you wanted to provide a written response at a later date. I'll leave that to you.
I'm happy to respond, Chairman. Just to say, following on from the meeting last week, where the committee asked if we'd been able to respond to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign's correspondence last year regarding many of the issues that the Speaker touched on, including issues of international law. I have been in touch with the Scheme Advisory Board to ask them to provide some sort of time frame for a response to a lot of those issues, and I'm awaiting a response from the Scheme Advisory Board. I suspect they are still awaiting something from government as well, but as soon as something comes through, I will let the committee know about that, of course.
Last week, the matter is change.
Right, okay. Okay, all right. Well, thank you. It's no, not really, because I think the supplementary question was just to do with who's going to pick up the costs. That's all. And will it be now, I understand it's not going to be the pension fund members who pay the cost, because that's already government will pay it. Who's going to pay for when we do get had up for this? Or, you know, it is a genocide.
I don't believe there's even, as you intimated, I don't think there's a suggestion that the government is going to pay, or that anybody's going to pay at the moment, because we simply don't have an answer to that. We're awaiting it as much as you are, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. Right, thank you.
Right. No, thank you. Sorry, could we just, for the record, could we just capture your name, please?
Jenny. Sorry, Jenny Agricola.
Thank you, Jenny.
Would you like me to send the actual question in?
Yes, please do. That would help.
Okay.
Save transcribing it. Right. We'll welcome Councillor Stewart as well this morning. So our numbers are racing up. Item 4 on the agenda then is members' question time. We don't have any written member questions. Do we have any member questions on the day? No? Right. Next thing we'll do then is go to item 5, which is report for noting, which is an update on the pension pool legal framework, which is in the pack. It's about 20 pages long. And I think, Steve, you're going to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So some of this touches on some of the ground we covered last week, and some of the new posts and roles being introduced by government in pension schemes, such as senior officer with a statutory basis, and an independent person being somebody new on the committee to help with governments, and also to help with the transition into the new arrangements with the new pools that will be in operation from the 1st of April. But we've also had quite a lot of, as well as the pension bill, quite a lot of further information in terms of the draft regulations and draft guidance from government around about Christmas time, early New Year as well, that fleshes some of their expectations out. So we've tried to cover some of that ground in the report you've got in front of you, including, I think, a note from Hymans Robertson on this. The draft guidance essentially covers the new pooling arrangements, some of the government issues, and new expectations around the investment strategy statement. Much of it really confirms the framework that government's been pushing since its consultation back in late 2024. It confirms that assets will have to be managed within new investment pools that are Financial Conduct Authority regulated companies, that those pools will be responsible as the prime source of investment advice to pension funds going forward, and only in very exceptional circumstances should pension funds take advice outside of that source. And it also gives powers to the investment pools to appoint investment managers, and quite a lot of extensive powers to implement investment strategies. So whilst pension funds as administrative authorities will still set a very high level investment strategy, an awful lot of the detail as to how that operates in practice will be left to the new pools to put into practice. For example, although as a pension fund we can decide what level of equities we want within the fund, whether we're committed to equities and what level, whether that be a passive investment or an actively managed equity investment, would be left up to the investment pool company for them to decide rather than us. So it's a very different future, I think, maybe than the one we used to going forward. Issues such as responsible investment and local investment implementation will not be left to the pool. Authorities are encouraged to coordinate their responsible investment policies as much as possible between each other. I think probably to maximise the impact of those policies. And going forward, once we're within the new investment pool from the 1st of April, we'll have 21 days to move our assets within their control through the power of attorney that they will have over our assets. There's also quite an extensive list of knowledge and understanding requirements as well being put forward by government. None of that is unexpected, but it'll apply equally to officers as well as members of the committee. But we do have a policy in place for that. It will probably need some tinkering just to make sure we've captured everything that government expects. But as we said before, I'm afraid going forward, knowledge and training will be important for the committee. It does give extensive powers as well to the Secretary of State, if necessary, to direct and to instigate the independent governance reviews that are part of this new framework going forward. There'll be regular reviews, independent reviews of pension funds as part of these arrangements. I think the new pools are certainly left with significant challenges to comply with government's requirement by the 1st of April. The central pool, for example, has got 15 funds, but it will have to make these new arrangements for. So there's clearly an awful lot of work to be done in a very, very short time frame indeed. Although this is all draft, I think it's very unlikely that the direction of travel will be different when it's finalised, when the pension bill passes. So we are having to comply with this new framework, I'm afraid, going forward and take it into account. As I said, the new pools are expected to be up and running with us part of them from the 1st of April this year. So with that, Chairman, I'll pass back to you for any queries, questions.
Thank you, Steve. We are aware, of course, that although they have to be up and running by the 1st of April 2026, the requirement to move 100% assets is only to the 21st of April 2026. And as we were advised by our external advisors, that the prospect of meeting that for all of our funds is about nil. And some of them are perhaps going to take years to actually exit or transition. So the question really is not only moving the assets to central, but central accommodating the movement of wholesale funds, perhaps in some mechanism in the meanwhile. Is that the case?
I think they're planning for 100% of the assets to be within their control within the required time frame. The question then is what the transition arrangements are, because some of them will just be transferred as it were in their current status with current investment managers. That might not be where it's left longer term. So the sort of second stage that follows, I guess, and one of the advantages of moving to central is they were clear that they wanted what was called the best of both. They want the best investment managers from their current arrangements and the best that Access had to offer. How they kind of blend that and then transition those into new investment managers will be the challenge, I guess, after the 21st of April. But we might hear more from Central shortly because we've arranged them to join us, but I don't think they're anticipating a big bang approach at all. This will have to be phased over many months, I'd expect.
So the key word there is under their control. That's the phrase that's being used to define compliance with a regulatory condition, is it? So as long as the control can be determined, rather than the control resting under access, then that's okay.
In short, yes. That's my belief, Chairman. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Right. I'll come to Councillor Churchman and then Councillor Stewart. Nessa.
Yes, what I cannot quite work out is where this LGPS officer sits in the current hierarchy. Are you subject to him, or are you on the same level, or is he under you? And what is his purpose? To me, it seems an added bit of bureaucracy, but I just don't understand where it fits into the current scheme of things.
Good question, Vanessa. Of course, we are advised that the new officer position cannot be the 151 officer.
Yes, that's correct. It can't overlap with the 151 officer. You can't make it an existing statutory role, as it were. So you couldn't confuse this with the 151 officer or the monitor officer or chief exec for that matter. So it's distinct and separate. It's given duties such as ensuring that the pension fund has adequate budget and resource to fulfil its statutory duties and its compliance functions with the pension regulator and so on. And I think that's all given in the draft regulations as part and parcel of its role and a means of operation. But it is also meant to be, I think, that the status with that statutory backing is meant to be sufficient backing and status that it has a degree of flexibility in decision-making capability, as it were. So it's, you know, the emphasis being on the senior officer, and the statutory role should give it some gravity, if you could put it that way.
Does that clarify anything for you, Vanessa?
Doesn't really clarify anything, no. And of course, the other thing that worries me is where do we find one? We have problems as it is recruiting staff, and being a little tiny Isle of Wight, I really wonder whether we will be able to find somebody to fill the position anyway. My other question is, on page 6, we talk about not permitted to routinely test the advice they receive. Now, as a trustee, I'm sorry, that goes against the grain. This is what we are here for as a committee, to keep an eye on what the pension fund are doing. And at the end of the day, I keep saying we are the people legally responsible for the fund. So how does this fit in with our trustee responsibilities?
I think it's a fair question. It's a new world. I can only report on what the law is telling us is the situation. I mean, envisage we have support from Hyman's for the time being whilst we transition to these new arrangements. And we've had some initial discussions with Hyman's Robertson about the length, as it were, of their support and what that may look like going forward as well. But the legislation says your primary advice will be from the pool, and it's only exceptional circumstances you will take advice outside that, and that's again what we're having to report to you as the law as it expected to stand very shortly.
So to clarify that would preclude us taking advice from Hyman's or any other advice that we acquire in the open marketplace.
It comes down to what's meant by exceptional, and I might have to ask possibly one of the lawyers in the room if they've got a view on that.
Kirsty, do you want? I think both Emma and Kirsty are keen to come on this. I think Emma was slightly, has got number one. So go to you, Emma, and then I'll come to Kirsty.
It was just to say that it doesn't necessarily preclude you from taking advice. Your role as trustees will move more to oversight of the pool to make sure that they're implementing things in the way that you would wish them to. So almost the way you do with managers now, your role will be to oversee the pool and the way that they are investing assets on behalf of the fund.
I'm none the clearer, but maybe if we go to Kirsty, she'll add more to that. I don't understand what the clarity here is. What we're trying to get to. We're trying to understand the clarity, the distinctness of each of the roles involved. And from what Steve said, the role of this new position, it sounded like an amalgam of a chunk of what Steve does today and a chunk of what Louisa does today. And then when we come on to this issue about taking advice, that again seems to preclude us taking advice or going against, in a way, anything that the pool does or does not do. Again, it's denuding the ability of this committee to direct the investments which we have trustee responsibility for. Kirsty.
Chair, I agree with everything that you have just said, in that the purpose of this legislation is to change the role of this committee. Your fiduciary or trustee-like responsibilities to manage the assets of your pension fund are subject to your legal obligations, and this is going to be a very fundamental change to those legal obligations, and so your fiduciary duty is going to evolve as a result. You will be required to take primary investment advice from your pool when you are setting your strategy for investing the assets. And as Steve said earlier, everything else underneath that, so implementing the strategy, is to be done by your pool, and you are to have oversight of that. So you need to understand how they are implementing your strategy, what they are doing, the ability to question them and make sure that you are satisfied with it. That is going to be your role. What the legislation is trying to say is the government does not want you to then take separate legal advice separate investment advice to actively challenge what your pool is doing, except in very exceptional circumstances. There is some statutory guidance that gives some, it's still in draft, and it gives some not very helpful examples of what might be exceptional. The clear direction of travel is that you are supposed to look to your pool in the first instance. As I say, it's going to feel very different to how you operate at the moment, but that is deliberate, and that is the obligation that the government is looking to put upon you.
Thank you, Kirsty. So to be clear, what is the mechanism by which we challenge advice from the pool? In our ability to scrutinise what they may suggest in terms of its appropriateness to us and to our pension scheme, the detail and the quality of the advice that they may be offering to us, remembering in every instance that it is only advice. We remain, I believe, the decision-making authority in relation to the policy on investments.
So at the moment, if you look at the advice that Hymans provides to you, you receive that advice, you discuss it within the committee, you ask questions. You will be doing exactly the same thing, it's just that the advice will come from your pool. It's perhaps worth noting at this point that in addition to the senior LGPS officer, you will be expected to have an appropriately experienced independent person as part of your pension committee. And I think the government is envisaging that that individual will also help enable the committee to ask questions, but in exactly the same way as you do now. So you will be making sure that you understand the advice that you have received and that you understand what your pool is doing. What the government just doesn't want you doing is then going to a separate advisor organisation to get different advice that you're then using that to test and challenge what your pool is doing. I appreciate, sorry, Councillor Churchman, I see you shaking your head, and absolutely, as Steve said, this is what the law is saying.
So to come back on my original question, what is the mechanism by which we challenge the advice that comes down from the pool? If we disagree with that advice, what is our mechanism as a scrutiny function for rejecting that advice or for taking a different course if we believe that it is wrong?
So when you appoint central to, or when you appoint a pool to manage your assets, there will be a contract that you will be signing. So there will be mechanisms within that for ensuring you receive information, you receive reports, and have a means of engaging with them in exactly the same way as you do with your current advisors. Remember, as Emma said, your role is to set the investment strategy. So that is what you will be receiving advice on. You will not be receiving advice on the underlying implementation. You will be receiving updates on how the pool has been implementing your strategy, and you will have opportunities through your engagement with the pool. Central, for example, has got all sorts of forums, reports that they run, and there will be engagement through there, both at the officer level and so on, where you will know what they're doing on your behalf and be able to ask them questions. So that's the mechanism, Chair. It will, I expect, feel quite similar to what you have at the moment. It will just be through the pool rather than with your external advisors.
So if we want to move funds because we believe there is a better potential for return from Fund B rather than Fund A, we can still move money, investments between one fund and another as long as they're within the central pool. We can take that decision.
No, you cannot.
That's why I asked the question.
So that is no longer your role and your function as the Section 101 committee when this new legislation comes through. That is the role and the function of your pool. Your role as the committee will be to set the high level strategy, which says of the asset classes listed in the government's template, you have this percent here, this percent here, this percent here. Everything else, which investment manager is chosen, the style of investment, all of that is to be delegated down to your pool, and your legal fiduciary duty fundamentally changes as a matter of law. Those are no longer your decisions.
As I thought. So I sometimes ask questions so that I believe I know what the answer is, but it's important that we record it and that everybody gets to hear it. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. You all said much what I would say, so I don't have to add very much. But the bottom line is that the government has made these decisions. The Hyman's advice, when you look through it very carefully, we don't need to look through it very carefully, is stark about the change of control and the change of how we actually can deal with what our duty is. And therefore, by definition, as Kirsty just said, our role changes. And that's what the government are intending, and that's what they want, and that's what they're putting through as legislation. So we don't have a lot of choice. What we might have, obviously, is to make a statement to the appropriate minister that we are concerned about some of these issues, specifically that we are concerned about and let's go to Hyman's because they have better words than I do. It is unusual that investors' ability to test the advice they receive is limited, and then funds should have the option of testing advice at the time it is received, not up to 3 years later. And so I would suggest that we go simply to the government and say, this is the advice we received from specialists. This is the knowledge that we have. This is our belief as well. Please, will you make sure that this is reflected in legislation? They may very well come back. In fact, I think it's extremely likely they will come back and basically say no, but we need to make our objection clear at that level. There is no doubt, having gone through this process, the pool we are, central pool, which is our pool now, are trying really, really hard, along with our officers, to try and manage this process in a sensible and appropriate way. So, you know, I'm happy where we are. It's the best place we can be, clearly. But it is something from, you know, what do we do? And as I say, I think it will be worth us putting up a committee's view forward to the minister. Thanks.
Waiting.
I don't like to say this, but you know, for all the wanting to do a damn good job with the, as been done with this committee in the officers, indeed. In this new role playing, and to me that's a concern. I mean, Councillor Churchman brought up the and it was below the other things that I had lined in paragraph 6. We're not allowed to, or funds are not permitted to routinely test the advice that they receive from. I think that, you know, we are losing our opportunity to scrutinise what our funds are doing, how they're etc. And or a concern. And to me, that's very hard to swallow. I'll leave it at that because a lot of things said already, so I'll thank you for that. But I feel very, very uncomfortable with this situation driven by central government, and to me, it's not good. It's not the way that we should be acting as a local interface with our stakeholders. Thank you.
Just quickly, we have fed back at any opportunity we've been given in the different consultations government have had, that we did see as part of the fiduciary role of the committee to access the advice it felt it needed at the time it felt it needed. And I'm sure we're not alone speaking to colleagues in that feedback to government. So we have done that, but I can only report the law and the draft guidance we've seen as it stands, which says you will take primary advice from the pool, and only exceptional circumstances will you take investment advice other than that. So that's as it stands, I'm afraid, and that's what the expectation is government will firm up on.
Is a worry for everybody, and if I can give any assurance, which I don't, the whole landscape is changing, so there will be a new person that will join you, a new independent person like an NED that will join you on this committee that will bolster things to help chat with some of the challenges back. We are looking at forums, as Kirsty said, there are the one-to-ones we can have with them as frequently as we want to raise concerns. There are then all the office forums, and then there'll be forums for participation from yourselves. There is then another level of fiduciary oversight forum, which is being discussed to then hold the board account as a collective. So there's opportunities for us to feed in on our individual basis, but then if everybody's not happy, again, so there's a lot of at the moment, I'm not the only ones with some of these concerns. So hopefully we'll keep pushing, and we are joining in those conversations to raise concerns in these matters, to make sure there's oversight. And the only other point I'd make on the senior officer role is I do think a little bit about what senior officer role may look like. There are funds out there at the moment that already have senior officer roles, so we can look at those. But actually, I think the notes helpful to some degree. If some guidance, it sort of says that it's more to make them more ahead of service, so that within the council we can make sure we've got adequate resources for what we need to do, and we're not impacted necessarily by what's happening on the other side of things, if that makes sense. So it should hopefully strengthen things. So again, it should be a positive and help the fund.
Long time ago. This has legislation which has to go before Parliament. Therefore, I would suggest if we have particular concerns and particular points to make, then we have 2 MPs, and as a committee, we could make representations to both the MPs. And I would suggest that that may actually be better than just simply going to a minister who will be told what to say by people like I was once. And I know that both MPs are fairly robust in their approaches to different things. So I was saying, if we keep it limited as to what we ask them to do, then they can raise that during the passage of the bill. And if there are sufficient MPs who are of that mind, then it is likely that the government may slightly change their approach.
Good idea. Councillor Churchman.
I think what worries me is the government are taking control of a pension scheme, but the people involved are not actually employed by the government. They're employed by local government. The government could not take, for example, the pension scheme of the private company. So how can they be allowed to dictate to all the people? And I wonder whether all the people in our pension scheme, 3,000, I can't remember.
18,500.
Sorry,
18,500.
18,500. None of those people, apart from the union and Steve, have been involved in any of the discussions about this, but it is their money. We're taking their money into the pension scheme out of their wages. We as the council are adding a bit, but they're not being informed and they're not having any say whatsoever in a government that wants to take control of the pensions and try to dictate to us where the money is invested. I find this quite incredible. It's not fit for the future, it's unfit for the future. I'd like the 2 letters UN added. Thank you.
But I think we have discussed this at some level in the past, and today I think all the views are of one mind. Councillor Stevens' use of the word toothless, I think, was probably very apt, because that's what this is all about. And at the end of the day, the independence of local government pension schemes is being taken away by primary legislation. So to present this in any other fashion than the government using primary legislation to seize control through the bodies and only the bodies which they approve, and in a mechanism by which they approve it, is what is in progress. And we are clearly unwilling participants on that journey, but unable to influence it, as indeed, as you pointed out, Councillor Churchman, are the 18,500 beneficiaries of the scheme, and indeed the affiliated bodies within it. We are all passengers on this particular bus. But I think Councillor Stewart's point was very well made about would it be possible, please, for Steve to generate a draft letter to both MPs simultaneously, crystallising, so it's not 20 pages, crystallising the key points that we've discussed today, and I'm sure which have been made several times in your representation, and that we will send that, I'll happily sign it and send it on behalf of the committee as a whole I cannot say that I would hold out a great deal of optimism by that, but it is something that, as a letter to our MPs, we could also consider sharing with the other affected local government bodies who may then choose to provide similar representation to their MPs, taking into account the point that Councillor Stewart made, that sometimes it's a weight of MPs with a similar degree of representation, which can make a slight dent in a policy. We're all happy with that. Louisa, Steve first. And then we'll just check everybody's happy with it.
Yeah, sorry, no, I was just going to say that under the Public Service Pensions Act 2013, the Secretary of State acts as the responsible authority for the local government pension scheme, responsible for making regulations to govern the scheme. So they already have, they can do this. And there's already regulations in place. So it's not quite like a private sector one. They can already dictate. They are the responsible authority. Just as a reminder. And then just to say on the fiduciary oversight point, I think that's the bit where we're trying to work on what the government structure could be. So we're working very closely with Central and other partner funds to tease out what other people want around some of those practical structures as well. So just to reinforce on that point, so sometimes it's the practicality piece as well, where we're trying to make sure we can have those open conversations.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to have a second go at this senior officer role, and I normally try to keep my remarks to factual content for the committee, so I think maybe trying to answer the question, to be up front, I'm probably veering a little bit more into opinion here. But I think it's an attempt by government to have a degree of separation for the pension fund. I know a few years ago there was a review by government of whether pension funds naturally sat or comfortably sat with the councils, and should there be some separation there. And I think they concluded they were fine at that point. But I think this, bearing in mind, Section 151 officer can sometimes wear two hats because they're also representing the council and the employer, that this is a little bit more weight of independence behind the pension fund. But I couldn't point to anything in writing. That's just my opinion of it's a step down that road.
I think your opinion is well respected here, Steve. And we don't only deal with facts, we do deal with opinions, and expertise is portrayed by opinions. So that's very important to us. I might see it in a different way yet again, which is that effectively where we're being made toothless, this additional post is being put between the pooling body and the committee as a further mechanism of denuding our ability to manage the pension fund in any meaningful way. It seems to be a determination, another determination by this government to enforce another mechanism to maintain control rather than the committee having that control. So I'll come back to the point which was about the letter. Is everybody happy with the way I go winding the conversation back 3 or 4 minutes? Did we generate that letter and send it off, and also seek to share that with other authorities similarly affected?
Yeah, if you want to put it, no, if you want to put it as a motion, I would propose that. And
done, put. So seconded. Everybody happy with that? I guess we should formally, yes, so that's unanimous. It's good. And we'll await that at the earliest opportunity, please. We do have some recommendations here, which are at the bottom of page 5 on agenda item 5A. So I should put those recommendations. I'm not going to read them all. You can all read them for yourselves. I'm not going to propose changing them, because if I was, I might be adding a caveat to each or any of them, but we're not happy with it. But we're not happy with it. But we're not happy with it. I don't think that would be very effective at this point. So I'll put the recommendations as in the paper and look for a seconder for those. Councillor Stewart, thank you. Those happy to put those forward? Thank you. I would note at this point that there are additional paperwork on this topic, which are now been released yesterday. I think in the appendices to the full council papers for next week. Councillor Stewart's just opening his big bag. In those, just to give a little heads up, Councillor Stewart, in there are some is paperwork pertaining to this and a number of appendices related to that. So it's appendices of appendices, which relate to quite a few of the mechanisms relating to the pooling. I did reply to that yesterday evening, noting that those papers which pertain to the activities of the Pension Committee had not been received by the Pension Committee. They've been put into the full council agenda, noting that the agenda item is a paper presented by the chair of the Pension Committee, which it isn't, because I haven't presented it. And if the actual paper, when it is now in the pack, is under the name of the 151 officer. Have you seen that full council appendices relating to the Pension Committee? It's big.
I have seen it. I don't recall it being quite like that big.
Yeah.
To refresh.
The good news for Councillor Stewart, who just opened this, is he does have until next Wednesday to fully absorb that. It's about 900 pages, I think. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've made the point. The paperwork which is in there, I would, we haven't seen a lot of it. I would encourage the members of the committee to pay particular attention to the points with the section which is in there about the pooling activities. It is towards the end of the full council papers, which in itself is remarkably odd, because the full council papers are concerned not only with the budget, but a raft of other measures. And normally, the meeting at the end of February is dedicated to the budget
only.
not only to a raft of other measures being brought in. And it does run the risk that the debate on the budget may be not insubstantial, and in doing so, there might be some risk that the papers beyond halfway through the pack or whatever may not be reached. And the budget meeting is itself not extendable, I understand. So the question is, Steve, in a way, what would be the issue if the pension pooling components of the full council papers for next Wednesday are not dealt with? But you might want to consider, not now, but you might want to consider that as a bit of a risk for that meeting. I did see some exchange of emails yesterday where concern was expressed that an undertaking was made that the agenda for all meetings would be discussed with the chair of each of the committees, including full council, and including the PFR committee, and some concern that doesn't seem to have occurred very correctly. And in response to that, I understand that an informal PFR committee meeting has now been scheduled ahead of the PFR committee meeting on Friday to discuss the pack for the PFR committee, which is largely the papers going to the full council. It's only an hour. And yes.
I can help a little bit. It does mention sorry, this is literally the first time I've seen it, so
yeah.
It does mention the local transport plan 4, and I can tell you that went before whichever. Yeah, it was. Oh, okay. So I dealt with it. I knew I dealt with it. I've dealt with it in ERTI, so we can have a 3-minute discussion on that at most. We don't need to go through all of the papers on it.
I think that the pressure for council is that a lot of things that might have been dealt with by one of the service committees, which might be 7 or 8, 9, 10 perhaps members, but that still leaves another 29 members who have not discussed it and may wish to express some view on it. So I understand the desire for 4-minute discussion. pretty sure we'll obtain that. All right, so I think we've discussed the cautionary element for this Friday as the papers come to the PFR committee, and then the very large pack, which is for next Wednesday's meeting. Joy, oh joy. All right, so I think we've dealt with 5A, which is good. We'll now move on. So I have to read under agenda item 6, the exclusion of the public and press, to consider passing a resolution that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business, namely agenda items 7A and 7B, on the grounds that there is likely to be disclosure of exempt information in defined in paragraphs 3 of round 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I so propose and look for a seconder. Councillor Stewart, yes.
I always have concerns if we do put things behind a closed door, as it were. And I'm going through this, I'm not sure that I actually see the reasoning behind us not discussing this in open. There doesn't appear to be any information there which falls out with a reasonable open discussion.
We will have during that session representatives from Central to discuss with us the emerging relationship and contractual basis of our change of pooling. And I'm sure some of the questions related to that may tinge on that, but the point is well made. Councillor Churchman, you had something to say on that as well. No? Same point. So I'll turn to Steve at this point and see if he wants to comment on that issue.
Chairman, I think I just made the point that, as you made, we have Central joining us. We might touch on some of the commercial arrangements behind, the new pooling arrangements with them that might be sensitive. We've also got access to discuss and the legal terms of our winding up of access. Again, that might touch on areas of some sensitivity legally, and hence we've got Kirsty in the room to explain that. So that was behind the thinking, and also the appendices there, which stem from third parties. We're asked to keep confidential as well. So that was the thinking.
Given the fact we have potentially commercially sensitive issues that will be raised with our potential commercial partners and potential legal advice coming from outside, does that change your view, Councillor Stewart, sufficiently?
No. I accept entirely the view of officers and their particular approach. Mine is slightly different. We have agreed to go to this with Central. I think it was a sensible decision. I have no problem with that. We may be discussing the terms of that, but again, I feel that we could put that into public view. And to be honest, I suspect there wouldn't be a lot of public interest in it. But in the view of openness generally, I feel that that's something to be considered. I accept that other people will have different views.
I think what I'll do then is canvass each of us on the committee for our view on this, because Councillor Shields made a very good point. I understand the contrary as well. I'll go around to the table, I think, and see what people feel about this. Councillor Stevens, you're sat next to Councillor Stewart. No, of course.
I've got a contrary view. I think that the decision was made not on the hoof, but in the cold light of day when the paper was brought forward, taking into consideration all aspects of what could or might be brought forward under the auspices of this paper. I'm quite of the opposite view. I think that we have a paper in front of us that is actually recommended that it's held in camera, and I'll go along with that.
Councillor Blake.
I share sympathies with both the councillors just spoken. I would like this to be in public. However, I think it practically it risks something coming out that maybe shouldn't be held in public. So I think we should move to private session just to make sure we don't do something we shouldn't.
Right, I'm trying very hard not to influence my own decision on people here. Councillor Churchman.
I agree with what Councillor Blake has said. We cannot leave ourselves open to any form of illegality, for want of a better word. We just have, unfortunately, we live in a risk-averse society. So on this occasion, I'm going to be risk-averse.
These matters are always a question of balance. And here we're balancing the risks of a discussion with a potential commercial partner and with external legal advice against that need for public disclosure. And in most cases, I'm aligned with Councillor Stewart here. I prefer things to be open and transparent, but given the commercial sensitivity here and the complexity of those matters, which I think the earlier discussion has brought out, I think they do need to be brought with in a closed session. So I think that means we've got 4 support for closed session, 1 opposed to closed session, and that means that we will enter into closed session. Thank you. All right, we'll just we'll take a 5-minute break while the technology is adjusted, and we'll thank you for attending today. Anybody wants to have a comfort break, please do so now, or drink of water.